Hello, this is Judy McMath of the Center for Unhindered Living, and today we're going to talk about Exposing the Church of Christ, Episode 3. For those who haven't seen my other videos, I'm a former member of the Church of Christ. I left that church many years ago because of their false teaching. And so I'm now trying to help others who are in that denomination who are questioning whether or not what they teach is right. And I'm just sharing my experiences. Today we're going to talk about the silence of the scriptures. Now, this is a made-up doctrine. Well, I guess I shouldn't really call it a doctrine. It's a interpretation method because it doesn't appear anywhere in the Bible. There's nothing in the Bible to suggest that this is a correct or helpful way of interpreting the Bible, but this is what is used by the Church of Christ. And in a nutshell, the silence of the scriptures says if the Bible doesn't explicitly tell us that we can do it, then it is prohibited. Now, there's all kinds of problems with that. First of all, there's no precedent, there's no reason to believe that that is what the writers of the Bible intended as far as the way we're supposed to think about whenever you read something that's very ancient. The first question you have to ask yourself is, how would the people to whom this was written have interpreted this? What would they have thought of it? How would they have understood it? And there's no reason to believe that the people in the first century actually understood the Bible this way. This is totally made up. So there's actually no way that this method of interpretation makes any sense, because there are tons and tons of things that are not specifically written about in the Bible, and yet we do them. Let me give you an example. There's nowhere in the Bible where it tells us to build church buildings and to meet in church buildings. Now, we do have an example that in the first century, the book of Acts tells us that the Christians met in homes. They met together in people's homes. They did not build big church buildings and meet in church buildings. And yet today, we build church buildings. The Church of Christ builds church buildings. But yet that is not commanded, or we have no examples of that in the New Testament. And this is something that the scriptures are silent on, and yet we still do it. So what things do they single out as far as their pet doctrines that use this interpretation method? Well, one of them is the fact that they do not believe that you should have instruments of worship. No playing of piano or organ or any kind of instruments in the worship service. All their singing, all their music is a cappella singing, and it's believed to be a sin to have instruments in worship, because in the New Testament it's not commanded, nor is there any example of anyone using an instrument. Now, it's beside the fact, I guess, that in the book of Psalms that David wrote, God supposedly told him to praise God with the harp and the cymbals and all these different instruments. But then they'll say, oh, well, we don't live under the Old Testament anymore. Well, I agree that in the New Testament, the old law was done away with, but the book of Psalms is not a book of law. It was a book of poetry, of praise, of psalms, of songs that David wrote in praise to God. It was not a book of law. Therefore, yeah, throw out the books of law, but these are songs. These are songs of praise and worship. There was no law in them. So we don't have to throw them out. So they say, well, because we don't have an example of it in the New Testament, we can't do it. The New Testament doesn't tell us to brush our teeth, and yet we do it. There are millions of things that the Bible is not specific about, but that gives us no reason to believe that they're prohibited. for instance, and the Church of Christ is very hypocritical in this because they have all kinds of things that they single out for some reason as being prohibited, such as there are some churches of Christ that say you can't have a kitchen in the church building because there was no examples in the Bible of a church building with a kitchen in it. Well, there was no examples of church buildings at all, and yet we build them. Why is it bad to have, the Christians met in homes. Don't you think those homes had a kitchen in them? They had someplace where they cooked their food. Why is that a sin? Because it's not mentioned. Then some churches of Christ say that there's no example where they had Sunday school. So some churches of Christ prohibit having Sunday school. They just have worship service and that's it. They say Sunday school is prohibited because we weren't commanded to do it and there aren't any examples of it. And then they say you can't celebrate Christmas because we have no examples in the Bible where anybody celebrated religious holidays, and those holidays are all man-made, and we weren't commanded to observe any holidays, nor do we have examples of observing any holidays. Therefore, you can't celebrate Christmas. So these are things that they've picked out that they have prohibited for no good reason. Now, my theory about why they have prohibited instruments of worship is just because, Alexander Campbell and Barton W. Stone and all those people back in the 1800s, during the time that they were trying to revive or restore the New Testament church, they were trying to get as simple, and they didn't want things that were, the Victorian era was very ornate and showy, and they wanted to get away from all that. They didn't want anything showy. They wanted things to be simple and pious and not showy and not emotional and not showing off. And so they didn't want any instruments in worship. They would have been better off to just say that than to try to twist things around to make a doctrine that doesn't exist. So this is just one of the areas where they try to take their pet doctrines and do some mental gymnastics and come up with a way to justify them. But there's nothing in the Bible that leads us to believe that this is an accurate or helpful method of interpreting the Bible. It's something I've never heard in any other denomination except theirs, and it doesn't make any sense, and there's no justification for it. Most of the time people say, in other denominations, they say, well, if God specifically said to do it, then we should do it. But if he does not mention it, then that leaves it to our discretion whether we do it or not. But not the Church of Christ. If they don't mention it, you can't do it. Except they don't follow that. As I mentioned, if they followed that, we wouldn't have church buildings. We wouldn't have a lot of things that we have and that we do today if we actually followed that teaching. So I hope that clears that up for you. It's just another one of their erroneous teachings that has no basis in fact. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. Please click subscribe below so that you can see all my videos when they come out. And if you have any topics that you'd like to cover that I haven't covered, you are welcome to leave me a comment. Please don't leave any comments that say you're going to hell, you're wrong, blah, 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 because I will delete them. I don't have time for any of that stuff, nor am I interested in debating with you. These are my observations. This is my way to help give support to people who are questioning and who would like to embrace some other way of life other than what they've been taught, and they are afraid to do so. Please believe me, you'll be better off if you give it up. So, thank you for watching. Have a great day.